Hello, collective listeners. On today's episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective, every guest is special to me. So, I guess I have to stop introducing every guest as a special guest. But yet again, somebody else who has made an impact on my life as a strength and conditioning coach, Sam Whitney, who is the owner of Align the Grind, which we'll get into what that company kind of looks like for him. But uh, Sam is somebody who's extremely transparent, and I think you guys will really appreciate in listening and what he has to say about why he left collegiate strength and conditioning and talk about the tough things, because I think it's really easy to say, oh, on my third block of my long mesocycle, whatever you want to get into, I do, hamstring isos, and that's helped our team be less sore in season. I mean, that's valuable information, right? And everybody likes to hear these things. But to me, a lot of these things ultimately don't make a massive difference with your team. It's the relationships, it's the tough parts of strength and conditioning that if they don't get addressed, that will never really get changed, right? And I think he does a really good job of explaining the difference between transitioning and knowing your value versus not knowing your value. And I think it's really important to understand that as strength coaches and understand that every situation is not going to be right for you. You don't have to force it to make it work for yourself. There are other options out there, and that you can still affect people and make a positive impact on other people's lives. So I really appreciate Sam. I appreciate his honesty and his openness. And it was really good to catch up with somebody who's had an impact on my career. So without further ado, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode of the Samson Strength Coach Collective, we have another special guest to me. Okay, we have Sam Whitney, owner of Align the Grind, and the reason I say he's special to me is because when I was a senior at Temple University, I actually took a class taught by Sam. It was Olympic and powerlifting, and he really broke down a lot of technique, and I really learned a lot from him in that class, and I thought it was probably my favorite class I took at Temple. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. Thank you, Sam, for coming on.
Connor, my man, thanks for having me. Yeah, that was a good time. I really enjoyed teaching that class and having you as a student in it. And I'm very happy to see where you are in your career.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it was, seriously, it was so much fun. And I like
It was fun.
when I talked to other strength coaches, like they didn't really have a class like that. And I thought it
Yeah.
was really cool because at the time, we'll get into this, but you were working at Temple as a strength and conditioning coach. And so you had live experience with athletes and were able to teach us, okay, how do we actually teach this to a large group of people instead of like a one-on-one session? So I really appreciated it. I thought it was a fantastic time.
Yeah, it definitely was an enjoyable class to teach and somewhat unique
Oh
in
yeah.
that manner, as you said.
Yeah. Well, Sam, can you kind of just take us through your journey through strength and conditioning? I already kind of spoiled it a little bit, but we'd love to hear about everything from the start and then what brings
Yeah.
you to Align the Grind.
Yeah. So, much like you, I graduated from Temple University with a bachelor's degree in kinesiology. I would say before that, my journey into strength and conditioning started out, and probably pretty seriously in sixth or seventh grade, where I really started to get into training for the sport that I was playing in, and my earliest memory or fondest memory of that is being on the wrestling team and going to school to practice during winter break, and some of the conditioning we did. At that time, I was in the suburbs of Cincinnati, Ohio, so we would shovel the track in the snow and then run around it, and then go throughout the hallways in the. We were in middle school, so we didn't have a weight room in the school. So, but we would do push-ups and stuff in the hallway, and that's really what sparked a major interest in training for me. So, focused on that through middle school, through high school. Even gave up a few of my sports just so I could train and lift year round. And that's what sent me to Temple University to do kinesiology. Strangely enough, I strength conditioning was still relatively new at that time. Maybe at its peak, maybe 20 years or so. We give somewhere in the 80s, right? We'd say the career started, so the field started. I didn't even know you could be a strength coach, so I wanted to be an athletic trainer because I thought that was the closest thing to being able to do what I wanted to do until an awesome advisor that I had at Temple was like, you can go over to the football team and talk to the strength staff over there because I know you really like lifting, and
Much better option.
maybe you'll be a little more interested in some of these other things. And I was like, yeah, that sounds right. That's good. Um, so from there, I was a volunteer intern at Temple University, or I'm sorry, Villanova University, my senior year at Temple. I was the first volunteer intern at Villanova. Um, After graduation, I was able to stay there and become what was virtually their GA position, but it was just a paid internship. It didn't come with any schooling. So I stayed there. I was at Villanova for almost 2.5 years, maybe a little bit longer. In that time, the football team won the FCS national championship, and basketball went to the Final Four, which at the time was awesome. Now it's obviously been overshadowed a little bit by a couple national championships. But and then from there, I was looking for my first full-time job, which was at NYU at the time. So went the D3 route, stayed there for about 2.5 years as well, before I made my way back to Temple University as an assistant. And kind of over the next 10 years, I spent a lot of time at Temple and kind of worked my way up and helped to develop the culture and the programming there around our Olympic sports. And I helped out with football and basketball, but primarily on the Olympic sports side there at Temple.
Oh, that's quite the journey. Yeah, you're filling me in on details I didn't even know about. So I'm always
Yeah,
excited to hear. What was that process like, kind of starting that internship at Temple University, or sorry, at Villanova?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
obviously, I was at Temple, and we would talk about internships, and I went to UPenn, but Villanova was kind of like the premier strength and conditioning internship.
yeah. Like I said, at the time, it was all new to everybody there. So I went and I worked for Justice Gallic, who went on to work for the Jets for a pretty long time. I don't want to quote years because I'm not positive on that, but he was with the Jets and most recently in the XFL. So it was kind of new to everybody there, and we were figuring it out. But it really gave me the opportunity to create my own path. And part of why I say that is many of the professors that were at Temple at the time, um, I don't want to say they were unsupportive of me and some of my classmates, but we had a huge group of about 10 people that I graduated with who were all dedicated to wanting to be strength conditioning coaches. And as you know, the program at Temple has always kind of been in flux where at certain times it leans more towards the clinical side, then depending on who's teaching there, it leans more towards the professional route, which would be jumping right into things like strength and conditioning or personal training. I was there at a time where a lot of our professors, they pushed us towards going to PT school afterwards or going into cardiac rehab, being an exercise physiologist in a physical therapy clinic or an inpatient clinic setting. So there was no rule book. There was no, it was all sort of groundbreaking in a way to add universities as partners in this internship thing. And there was a bunch of us who did that. And there was a bunch of us who went on to be very successful collegiate strength and conditioning coaches from that.
Yeah, that's I just had a total opposite experience, but you speak
Yeah,
to
yeah,
paving the
yeah,
way. I mean, quite literally, because
yeah,
for me, it was we had internships that were set. We knew exactly where we could go. A lot of them were really encouraging on the strength and conditioning side. I felt like we had what the Exercise and Sports Science Association, the club on
yeah,
top of that too. So it
yeah,
felt to me like a really welcoming environment. So it just goes to show, when people do make that effort and say, hey, I'm not going to kind of fall into what we're looking for here. I'm going to kind of buck out like you guys did in that group of 10. Like you said, it makes it a lot easier for people in the future. It may not be easy
right.
for you in the moment, but down the road, you're helping out future strength coaches.
Yeah, and again, going back to that class that you participated in that I taught, that was so important to me because I didn't have anything like that, And the other thing about Villanova is I didn't learn how to be a strength coach in the slightest until the first day I stepped foot into a collegiate weight room as an intern at Villanova.
Mm.
And it was really then that I learned a lot about programming, exercise selection, and of course all the finer details, the art of it, of how to run large teams through a weight room based on your equipment. And as you know from being in the profession long enough, uh, not everything lines up directly with what's in the NSCA Essentials textbook.
I
Right?
think
In the
everybody
ideal
listening
world,
knows.
yeah, yeah. Make sure your mirrors are the proper height off the floor, and all those things.
The most valuable questions, right? That everybody
Yeah,
loves.
yeah.
And it's funny too because I don't know if you know this. I actually interned for Justice Gallic at the New York Jets for their fall
I,
training camp.
I, I did not know that.
Yep.
So
So those
we've
are
come
always the
full
strange
circle.
connections. But then one thing you mentioned too, kind of brought me back a little bit. So when I first came into Temple, I was going to be a doctor, and there was nobody who was going to
Okay.
tell me anyway. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
was smart enough and I was dedicated enough, and I took Chem one. And I literally stood up in the middle of like the third lecture, and I walked straight to my advisor, and I was like, "Hey, what can I do?" And she said, "You like lifting, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, you can be an exercise science major." I said, "Okay, that's fantastic." I told my mom, and she cried. And then we're in a better spot now today. She's a lot happier about it
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
It,
That's
it
funny. No, as
Go ahead.
long as we're being completely honest and transparent with each other, it was Kinesiology 101, I believe was the name of the class. And we were watching a video up on the big projector of sports injuries. And there was a crazy soccer injury where somebody's tibia came through the skin,
Oh.
and that's when I went straight to the advisor, and I was like, this is not for me. Like this is not something I want to see on a regular basis. So like
No
we got to
shot.
figure something else out, and that's how I discovered strength and conditioning.
Well, there we go. We both had a quite a fateful walk to the advisor's office.
Yeah,
Well, and one thing you did, and I mean, I really appreciated Temple's strength and conditioning program, and I kind of modeled a lot of the things that I tried to do my first couple of years after it. And you talked about building the culture of that strength and conditioning. So, can you kind of talk to me about that process a little bit?
yeah, sure. I would give a lot of credit to one of my former supervisors, and that's Scott Charland. He was in the industry for a long time. He's now in the private sector. Um, but I worked underneath three different people when I was at Temple, and we continuously grew our staff and what it meant to be the Olympic strength conditioning department. Um, but Scott brought a lot of ideas to the table and to me that with my dedication to the university, he would say it himself all the time. It's like no one's going to do a better job than you because this is your alma mater, and it just means more to you, right? So he gave me a lot of ideas and let me just run with my ideas in terms of building the culture. And really, in the simplest terms I can describe what that means to me as a coach is that I felt it was important to treat every single athlete equally, which is kind of the elephant in the room a lot of times amongst the football team gets these things and they've got their own staff. Same with basketball at a lot of universities. To me, I wanted to make sure that didn't matter. Like that thought wouldn't even creep into our athletes or coaches' minds. And the important part of that too was it didn't matter if you were volleyball or soccer, or yes, we trained dance and cheerleading, which I feel is notoriously kind of under-supported in terms of strength and conditioning. Or you can even say that our men's crew team, it's not an NCAA sport, but they were fully funded by our university and they were treated like a Division I NCAA sport. So we trained them as such. And everybody was held to the same exact standard and everybody was treated the same way. So, if you want to participate in our program, you got to follow the same rules. You got to do the same things. Coaches have to go through the same processes as of scheduling. You're going to be trained by someone on our staff or multiple people on our staff. And there's not going to be any sort of outside use to the weight room or anything like that. And it really just started with with treating all of those sports equally and setting that foundation.
I think that's really admirable, and the reason I say this because I myself, I mean, I have men's and women's basketball, and I have women's golf, and it's hard for me sometimes to, I would say, make sure that I'm giving the exact same treatment to each, right? Because my title is technically director of basketball performance, so literally my title is separate
Right.
already, and then.
Yeah.
I mean, but
Yeah.
they're some of the hardest workers we have, and I mean, their workouts
Yeah.
are like, I mean, gruesome. I mean, they absolutely get after it, and so why should I train them any differently? And
Hmm.
they've come here and they come for the same experience. So I think that's a really good reminder to strength coaches listening to make sure that we are putting as much energy into those teams as we are the kind of the premier sports.
Yeah, I think that's important. And even you said it yourself. I worked at Division 3 at one point too, and um, I've spoken to, as you know, I used to host monthly get-togethers for strength coaches in the Philadelphia area because we have so many. Pretty sure we're the most densely populated area in terms of colleges and universities. So I was able to get a lot of strength coaches together. And it's funny kind of talking to D3 and D2 coaches and seeing their perspective on uh, how they're supported by their administration and their university, and also what their interactions are like with their athletes. Versus D1, which I was also in D1. So I, the assumptions about Division 1 athletes is like they're all super talented, they're all there to work very hard. The university supports you, through and through with all the gear and just all the amazing things, right? And the flip side of that would be Division 3, not so much. And like those athletes are volunteering to be there, and like that's not their primary focus. But I can tell you this: the Division 3 kids oftentimes worked a lot harder than the Division 1 athletes that I had, and there was in the off season they had to volunteer to be there. So you would have team captains organizing workouts and getting the whole team together, um, unbeknownst to the coaching staff, to come in and train. And I just bring up that point because like you said, it's like just giving all the athletes the opportunity to have the same experience. I think it is super, super valuable, and you'll draw that atmosphere and that work ethic, and ultimately the culture of your weight room comes from all of those athletes, not from one team or not one individual.
And one thing I really like that you mentioned about it as well is a lot of times you can see a trend where the smaller sports are given a GA coach and kind of held to a slightly different standard, right? Because the GAs, I mean, I struggled with my first couple years of accountability, right? I was like, oh
Sure.
man, like if this guy missed the line, like he's gonna kill me later if I call him out,
Yeah.
right? Like small things that you don't understand are actually kind of important, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you come in, like you said, you all follow the same rules, all follow the same subset, all get the same coaching. And to me, that's a really successful strength and conditioning program through and through.
Yeah. And I think it took, so say in my 10 years at Temple, it took us a while to kind of figure that out. I think the pendulum would swing one way where, um, we had general, I would almost say generic programming styles where everybody had to program exactly the same way. And, there was always a full time staff member training those teams, or multiple full time staff members training teams. GAs were not given the privilege to train anybody independently. Um, and I didn't necessarily agree with that. And I could also be persuaded to go the opposite way, where um, that's a valuable experience for GAs and even volunteer interns to get their feet wet in coaching and to develop them as coaches. So I think it falls somewhere in between, right? Where again, it's maybe not so much programming specific, but maybe it is why we do certain exercises, what our exercise selection looks like, and overall just what the rules of the weight room are, and how we should carry ourselves first as coaches, right, leading by example, and then secondly how our athletes should carry themselves. And some people could say a lot of that stuff is petty, but I feel all strength coaches kind of fall somewhere in the fact that you're gonna show up, you're gonna look the part, right? Whatever the gear is that you're demanding be worn, all the athletes are gonna wear that. If there's no cursing or certain types of music, or my former athletes at Temple love to just still chirp at me on Instagram or something and just say tease up, because all of our custom plates and dumbbells, nobody was leaving the weight room until somebody or multiple people walked around and could certify that the Temple T was up on all the plates and dumbbells. So
Those things are lasting, though. I mean, and
yeah,
I talk to athletes all the time. You're going to be a leader just based off of the experience that you had in college and
right,
whatever facet, whatever area you go to in life, because you're going to be do things better than other people, right? I mean, it just
yeah,
at the end of the day, you're going to have a better process of how to go about things. Now, there may be some other people you work with who naturally are a little bit more gifted, but for people who go through these programs for 4 years, uh, they understand the importance behind smaller things. They understand the importance behind teams, and so you are going to be a leader outside of here. So
hmm,
those things are lasting, but even though they may joke about it, they still remember it, right? And so that's
yeah,
probably how they apply it to a lot of their process. And you brought me a quick flashback to when Coach Gallic, we were logos up. He's a big logos up
yeah,
guy too. And we were in the weight room, and I remember I had the New York Jets logo. I thought it was straight. If you had asked me, I would have said it was good. He came straight back around, and he's like, "Do you think this is upright?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think it's pretty good." And he goes, "No shot." And so I had to go around and fix every single thing again. But again, I'm better for it, right? Because
yeah,
that's somebody who held
absolutely,
me accountable and who was willing to show that they care about me by embracing the uncomfortable conversation and saying that's not good enough, because it's really easy
yeah.
to pat everybody on the back and say, "Hey, great job today," when at the end of the day, it probably wasn't the best job possible.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of tough love in
Oh yeah.
strength and conditioning.
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes a little too tough. Sometimes I might go home, cry in the car for a second, but not too
That could
bad
be true.
ultimately. So, one thing that we kind of talked about right before we got on the recording, and then something I knew about with your history, and I think you've been pretty open about. You did transition from collegiate strength and
Mm,
conditioning to the private sector. Can you talk to me
yeah,
about that process a little bit? What that process was like, and then also what were the driving forces behind that decision?
yeah, sure. Yeah, so I spent an awesome 15 years in collegiate strength and conditioning. I think ultimately it comes down to a lot of the different lifestyle factors that we all experience, and at the end of the day, I don't claim to know what everybody's experience is like in strength and conditioning. Let's say I only worked at three different places. A lot of strength coaches may hop around a lot more, have a lot more jobs, maybe some more prestigious positions than what I had. Um, but I'll just say the experience for me was, it was a grind. It was 15 years of very, very long hours, nights and weekends, and pinching pennies too. And I think that I can deal with the working hard, and I really enjoyed it. It brought me a lot of energy to be in the weight room. But when you get into your 30s and you're still scraping by, paying your student loans and just trying to figure out where the money's coming from, and trying to project forward into, I'm engaged now, getting married, buying a house, doing all these things. I'm positive there was ways around it that I could have probably done a better job, right? So I take some ownership there as well. But I also think that everybody deserves a fair salary for their work, and certainly for the number of hours that strength conditioning coaches, let alone all support staff. I don't want to forget about the equipment folks out there and the athletic trainers out there, sports medicine people who work the same hours as strength coaches. And a lot of times it's a thankless job, for the most part. And I kind of got really tired of things, and I knew I was tired. And then COVID hit, and COVID happened, and it affected everybody in different ways. But I think for a lot of people, it changed their perspective on work-life balance and what was important to them. How to stay connected with their friends and family and things like that. And I just started looking for any job, honestly, uh, anything that would get me out of the current environment I was in. Um, And I would say that was because we were asked to do a whole lot more than I was already doing. I didn't think it could get much uh, more difficult. I don't know if difficult is the right word. If things could be take up as much time as being a strength coach 16 hours a day, and attending every home game and traveling with teams and things like that. But somehow we managed to make a lot of work out of staying at home, and really earning our paycheck, I guess. And so that was a struggle for me. And then when we went back after all those months, we were outside in a tent. Yeah, for those of people listening who aren't familiar with where Temple is located in North Philadelphia, it's just, let's just say, it's probably not the place where you want to leave your material items out in plain view for everyone to see. So every single night we hauled equipment inside. We chained stuff down with bike locks and cables, and every morning 5 a.m. dragged everything out. It just seemed the tired, exhausted look on the student athletes' faces as they showed up, and we're checking their temperatures and making sure they filled out their symptom questionnaire every day, and then telling them, hey, you live in the sixth largest city in the United States, but make sure you're staying inside, other than coming to work out, of course. Don't hang out with your friends, even though they live in the dorm room, because they're on the soccer team, but you're on the rowing team. So we don't want to mix, even though you guys live in the same dorm, and all this stuff. And I was just like, what are we doing here, man? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't sign up to be policing this or to tell 18 to 22-year-olds how to live their life. Like, my philosophy was to teach them how to live their life the best I could through my actions, hopefully inspire them to be good humans, and to learn some valuable lessons in their 4 or 5 years that they spent with me that they could take into their career, like you already mentioned. Like, these skills that you develop, really just teach them how to reflect back on their time as a student athlete, to take that into their professional lives and their future relationships. And it just got to be too much at that point. So I knew I needed to pivot into something else. And it ended up being the private sector, which I'm very grateful for at this point.
Well, I mean, first of all, you're not alone. I mean,
Yeah.
I've heard a similar story from a lot of strength coaches.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
of that, but it's not just. It wasn't just COVID, right? And I mean, it wasn't just like these. That was more of the straw that broke the camel's back, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, everybody, if you're listening, if you're being honest with yourselves, has had moments where you're like, man, what else could I be doing right now? Because
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I remember there's been times a while back where I was like, man, I could be a nurse. I was like, I think I
Yeah.
could be a nurse because I mean, they
Yeah.
do what 3 12-hour shifts per week. I'm like, I do that. I do that 6 days a week.
Yeah.
That's realistic. Obviously, I'm not trying to slight or make light of anything of that work, but it is a grind. It is,
Mm-hmm.
and it's relentless. And I think what you brought up about pay as well is, I mean, like you said, like everybody is, and you see it on Instagram, social media doesn't make it any easier. Everybody's buying a house. Everybody's getting married. I moved to the South, so
Mm-hmm.
now everybody gets married at 24 and taking
Yeah.
these steps even earlier. So, I mean, it's
Yeah.
understandable. Did you feel like you heard some common themes amongst the other strength coaches in Philly when you had those monthly meetings?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you said that, because I was going to shift that way at the beginning of your question anyways. But yeah, I mean, those meetings certainly were not designed to be open complaint forums, but they were open format. I always called it the anti-clinic or the anti-conference. It's more so for us to actually get to know each other. Like, let's not just talk about programming and all that sort of stuff that you kind of do when you're at a conference or something like that. But yeah, there's oftentimes where the conversation would shift to. I mean, you're naturally going to lean on other people for advice, right? And there would be times where the conversation would shift towards, hey, I'm dealing with this problem with administration or this particular coach, or even some people that work for me. how's everybody else handling it, and what's it like to be, um, in your position at your university. Um, and sure, heard lots of similar stories. And I again, I loved it. There's a million things about it that I loved, and there is times where I'm like, yeah, I really miss this piece of it, but I just don't miss it enough to want to go back to it. Um, at least not right now. Um, but I think it's cyclical, just like the semesters and the school year are, and it's like you just reach that point of burnout at the end of the fall semester where well, for the lucky individuals who have had Olympic sports and not basketball like you, we would get a nice a couple days off, maybe a week off, 10 days in winter, and you come back rejuvenated in the spring, and then we start everybody. Well, now we're starting in season spring sports, and like it's like a fresh beginning. And then you get towards the end of the spring, and May hits, and you're dragging, and you've just done so many long days, and then the summer comes, and then you've got these 2 months where things are awesome. I mean, you're going to conference, you're limited hours in the weight room, and that makes up for the 16-hour days, and people go through these cycles where they love it, but they're just really burnt out at the end of the semester. And again, I'm not claiming to speak for everyone, but I know a lot of guys like that, and a lot of people in the profession like that. And I just got tired of riding that wave. And I knew when summer came, I was gonna love it. It's gonna be great. Summer packets went out, and people are volunteering to come in and just work out on their own if they're hanging on the campus. And it's a big hangout, and everybody's getting better. And you do some summer conditioning, but then fall comes around, and it's just same feeling again.
Well, it's 100% cyclical, like you said, but I think the piece is you get to that winter break, right? And you come back and maybe you're 95% back, right? And then you get to the summer break
Mm-hmm.
and now you get back and you're 90% back. It wears
Mm-hmm.
down. It doesn't,
Yeah.
it's not like this 1 week you're gifted is like, hey, here you go. Now I know you're going to be amazing and the best coach
Yeah.
possible after this tiny break that you
Right.
get.
Right.
And it's just so different because I don't know. I feel like I have a different perspective on it just because of my specific position of basketball,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
my director here is awesome from the Olympic side. I have a
Mm-hmm.
completely separate weight room. I have my own weight room that is in the basketball arena. The people I talk to the most are the basketball coaches, and
Yeah.
I love both of them. Like it's so easy for me to work for them because they're like what I call like human coaches, right? Like they're not
Yeah.
gonna ask me to stay till 7 if I don't have to stay till 7. But again, that's a much more rare situation. If you look at the bulk of collegiate
I
strength and
think so.
conditioning coaches, they're going to be on the Olympic side. They're all going to work together. And I mean, and sometimes if you don't like working with somebody too, that kind of chips away at you as well.
Yeah.
And on that piece, like it is more teams, it's more responsibility. It's just again, like you said, just that small break, and then you have to immediately come back. It's not and you deal with a lot of administration members, right? Like I mean,
Yeah.
I have my director, I have the director of Olympics or of everything, athletic training and strength and conditioning, and those are the only two I ever talk to.
Right.
But I mean, if you're in the main building, it's a lot different. And so, I mean, I know the answer to this next question because I'm able to kind of speak to my piece about why I am able to have more of longevity in the field but what do you think the things that would have needed for your to change for you to stay within the field of collegiate?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to your point first, let's say you are someone who only trains one sport. I mean, I think not only is having one sport under your control maybe an important factor for that, but it is the people that you work for and with too, right? So you happen to have uh, great people around you, including the basketball staff, to say like you don't need to be here to do meal checks or curfew checks. Like that's not on you. So you're hosting lift at 6 a.m. and then you're doing meal checks at 6 p.m. and you know I don't know any lazy strength coaches. So we are going to expand the amount of work we have to fit the time in which we're allotted. And I think this is an area where I can probably speak for the majority of strength coaches is we're not going to go home unless someone tells us to go home. Like, hey, it's cool. Like, I know you have other things you could be doing. I think it's important that you do this, right? If we feel obligated, we're going to do those things. So, I think certainly having one sport can be helpful. And I think having people around you working for administration and coaches who are much more understanding of the scheduling demands, and other things that are important to you outside of your career, whatever those might be. But that's on us as a profession too, because again, just kind of the head down, go to work individuals. We don't ever want to be seen as the ones that are saying no, or we don't like that, we don't enjoy that. It should be up to us to educate coaches, athletes, even, and administration that hey, me and my staff, we're putting in 10, 12-hour days. So if there happens to be a day where someone's not here, it's for good reason, and they can use that break and trust that the rest of us will handle those situations. And it's not important for your entire 6-person staff to be here from open to close every single day. A funny example I have is at one of the places that I worked had an administrator say that we needed to be there from 8 to 5 every day because those were the business hours for the business office. We're not the business office. We're the strength and conditioning staff. And if I'm here at 6 a.m. and I have the opportunity to leave at 3, why would you stop me from doing that? Because tomorrow I'm going to be here at 6 a.m. again, and I have a home game that starts at 6:30 p.m. and it lasts 3 hours. So I'm going to be here until almost 10 o'clock. So I just think there's a disconnect there with a lot of different people who haven't been in the industry or spent enough time learning about the people that work for them.
I mean, that's an extremely fair point on both sides, right? Because again, they don't really understand that same process, right? Because I mean, right now I'm in 20 hours, so Saturday, Sunday practices are going to happen, and it
Yeah.
just so happens you have men's and women's basketball. So always, when one has an off day on a Saturday, the other one's on, and then when other has a Sunday off or whatever,
Yeah.
you're always going to be here. And so my first year here, I kind of struggled with, okay, like, well, can I leave at 2 o'clock today? And then
Yeah.
and then now it's like, yeah, if I'm like, if it's a Tuesday or we had an off day on Monday for fall break, like I'm leaving at like 1. I left at 1 because like, what am I going to
Mm-hmm.
do? I got the work done I needed to, and I left because I knew I was going to be here this Saturday and Sunday. But I think that's a fair point too, is also not to just be upset about it, right? And then not say anything and not advocate for yourself, because there has to be that
Mm-hmm.
piece. You have to be the one who says and shows your administration, if that's really an issue, like, this is my schedule. Like, my full hours are actually way more than just what that 8 to 5 typically is. So if I don't have teams, there is really no need for me to be here in that moment.
Yeah,
You
that's right.
One question I'm curious about too, and I know you're a hard worker, right? I know you. I've seen what you've done, and
Mm-hmm.
you spoke about it. Like, I really don't know a lazy strength coach either, and if there
Yeah,
is one, I haven't known them to be in the field for very long, right?
that's
Uh,
right. Yeah.
when you were making that decision to transition to the private sector, did you battle at all internally on the process of like thinking like, maybe I am shying away from hard work?
No,
That's good.
that's an easy no for me because like I know my work ethic and I know the work that I put in over the years. And I've done a lot of self reflection even before moving into a different industry, but um, I did a lot of deep dive inner work and just kind of like figuring out what makes me tick, so that I can better understand myself and better understand the athletes that I work with. And I polled my friends, my family, and colleagues, all strength coaches, as to like, from the outside looking in, what are the strongest attributes you see in me? And I was really surprised to get so many of the same across the board with the people that I polled. And the number one thing was that I'm a person who always follows through. So if I say I'm going to do something, um, I do it. And to know that that's been recognized by other individuals, that was all the sort of validation I needed in terms of my work ethic. And that um, if I was leaning any direction, it was probably towards doing too many things and not knowing when to say no. And hard work has never been a problem for me in my entire life. So um, I truly, when I was debating leaving and ultimately made the decision to leave the industry, I made a positives and negatives list. And, as much as I miss the teams and the student athletes and the training sessions and what it's like to run a huge team in 60 minutes through a weight room and have everything so neatly organized and it just runs on the schedule you want. You've got that internal clock down pat. It's like beautiful, right? It's like a symphony. As much as I missed that, and that's the piece I still missed. I knew I was making the right decision for myself and my happiness, and that I truly can say that I did just about everything that I could have done to make the most out of that career. I think I could have made some different decisions along the way. I could have been better in some areas for sure. We all have areas we can improve upon, but um, I'd say ultimately, I knew I did the right thing. I worked hard every day. I brought an A effort to the athletes, and I fulfilled my responsibilities. So that's when I knew it was, I was not in the wrong, and it was time to move on.
Well, I'm sure that whole process made you extremely at peace with your decision.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, um, what really put me at ease was the negotiation process. It made it very, very simple. And I won't go into too many details, but it became very clear to me that I was disposable, and I perhaps wasn't valued in the way that I wanted to be valued. And how I perceive my value is my true value, and no one can tell me otherwise. So that negotiation process, try as they might, made it very easy for me to be like, all right, that's cool. And I went to a high school position immediately afterwards, which I did not enjoy at all. I was there for about 5 months, and it was more miserable than I could imagine. It was not the scene for me.
Fair enough.
And when I finally ponied up and said, hey, again, this is not. I'm meant to be. I walked into the athletic director's office and said, I'm sorry. I will not be here after break. I'm giving you my notice. That means 4 weeks from now, I'm not going to return. Um, and that person said to me, well, what are you going to do with yourself? And I said, I have no idea, but I know I'm meant to do much more than what I'm being asked to do here. As a strength coach who sat behind a desk all day, was forced to cancel training sessions and things like that, I was like, this is not my calling. This is not what speaks to me. And that was even easier for me to say than leaving the college sector. So I felt good about it along the way, and I think I'm in a good spot right now.
That well, I really respect that. I mean, seriously, to just understand
Yeah,
and first of all, not let your value be affected by the opinions of others, right? Because,
yeah,
like you said, college athletics it can be tough love. I mean, and like I mean, you can ride the highest of highs. You can come home and say, "Hey, I had a fantastic day. Great lifts, great practices. I got a compliment from the head coach on this, and everything was fantastic." And the next day you come back, right? And I mean, it may have been a bad lift, maybe been a bad practice after that. You kind of get barked at, asked the question about why your area is not holding up its end. And it could be, I mean, literally in a full 24 hours, you can go from loving the job more than anything to being like, man, I'll do anything else.
yeah,
But I mean, one, to just understand your value, and also in the negotiation process, not bend on that, right? And just say, okay,
yeah,
well, if you can give me a little bit more on this, then I guess that could be okay, right? You knew your value and you stuck with it. And then two, to answer that question, to say, yeah, I know it's not this, but I know I'm meant to do great things. I mean, I think that's really admirable, and I really respect that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think that's important for everyone. And maybe not everybody's in the same position financially or what have you to be able to do that. I mean, I certainly didn't know what I was going to do to pay my bills, but like again, if you're not in that position, I understand. But that was just something that was a decision I had to make because I knew I just wasn't going to be happy there.
I mean, that's only fair. And it's only fair to the athletes as well, too, right? I
Yeah,
mean, and
yeah,
people you're working with. And now I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. And I do want to talk about what you're currently doing. I want to, can you just tell me about Align the Grind and what's the mission behind it and how it's been going?
sure. It was in that same time frame of being affected by COVID um, and searching for other jobs, other careers, actually, not just jobs, um, anything and everything. That I started getting some people reaching out to me, former athletes of mine who were also struggling with some different things during COVID. Like I said earlier, it affected everyone differently, right? But no doubt it affected everyone. But I had some athletes reaching out to me and saying, like, thanks for the training program, the free training program you put out over COVID. I did a 6-week pay what you can body weight training program. And it was awesome. I mean, some people sent me $5, some people sent me $100, but I was like, that's something that added to my value too, right? I was like, oh, you can actually do something like this. You don't have to work in this structure. Like, you can figure this out. So that gave me hope. But these former athletes of mine reached out and said, hey, I really love the program, 6 weeks thing. Like, what's next? Like, can we do more? As a former athlete, I'm struggling, with my identity, with loss of my teammates, with as I get mature and get older, my friend group gets smaller. I'm losing contact with people, and ultimately, like, I've gained weight. I'm out of shape. All of those things, and they would say, we really loved your coaching. We appreciated your coaching, your wisdom, what have you. Like, how can we make this a thing? Can I like pay you to coach? And someone came up with an idea of putting together a community, and literally the next week or two, I had a small group get together, and it's morphed from there. It's now its own thing, and that's my sole focus. And I'm doing a lot of business coaching to improve, and I learn from the athletes that are in it as to what they want and how a community should function. But it is ultimately a community, and that's my desire, is to continue to bring people together. And my mission is exactly the same as it was when I was a college strength coach, and that's to impart some knowledge and skill set, or reveal the skills that student athletes have just by the basis of being on a team, playing a sport, uh, 20 hours a week, traveling, full course load, all the things that come with being a student athlete. Those are all to their advantage. They're all skills hidden in those. And I just don't think, from a college standpoint, we've done a great job at revealing how those skills can be used. Like, we know they're there. We tell athletes, like, you're going to be awesome because you were on a team, you're a captain of a Division I team. Employers are going to love this. And I think on the other side of that too, employers do love that on a resume, and they too know what skills can be there and are developed. But I don't think there's been a bridge between how do you help athletes transition into a professional career or into a life after college athletics. And that's kind of what this has become. As I educate myself more, training is the front door. We do training, we do nutrition. Obviously, I'm still a strength coach at heart, so that's how we focus on everything. But everything comes back around to being more holistic, and we focus on mind, body, and spirit. So we do meditation, we do yoga, we have morning routines, we cold showers, cold baths. We have a book club. We do weekly group or bi-weekly group coaching calls. I do check-in calls with all my athletes to get one-on-one FaceTime with me and they're accountable to each other. So even though they weren't on the same team in college, they now have a team and a really just a community to surround them and help them with their day
I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, I might just be joining in. I mean, that sounds
to day.
fantastic to me. Well, it's so funny
Jump
you
in.
bring that up because I obviously didn't play a collegiate sport, and when I first started working as strength and conditioning, I was like, I just didn't understand why everybody wanted to be around each other all the time. I just never like really got it,
Yeah,
like especially from the staff standpoint. And now, obviously, as I spent more time in it, I bought into the process and I appreciate it and I like it now. But I just didn't understand. And then exactly like you're mentioning, these people lose their teams and they go into these careers where it might be, like a corporate happy hour once a month, right? It's a completely different environment than what they're used to.
right.
And they don't have those other people holding them accountable. They don't have those coaches holding them accountable. So you've created that process for them.
Yeah, yeah. I've certainly tried, and you're right. It's they do enjoy an element of accountability, and again, I'll say building that bridge between someone always telling you where to be at what time and what to do versus create. It's all very strict and it's given to them versus now being the person who can tell yourself
Mm,
where to be at what time, um, and what to do when you get there, and be disciplined enough to to do those things. I think is just the kind of the disconnect, along with the identity piece. You know,
absolutely.
you play a sport for at a minimum 4 to 5 years. I mean, most people since they were children they've played the same sport, and then just one day your season ends, whether it's from an injury or you graduate, and that's it. And the athletes that I train and on the Olympic sports side, very few of them would ever have the opportunity to play professionally, right? Again, it's not basketball or football, or maybe those opportunities are a little bit more readily available. On the Olympic side, it's like for a lot of people, that's the end of the road. So
100%. And there's
that was always important to me.
and there's nobody there to make you do a burpee for every minute you're late to a staff meeting.
That's right.
Yeah, that's my thing, not Sam's. Well, amazing, Sam. I really appreciate your time. And again, this is like, I love hosting this podcast because it's always energizing to me. Like I look at this as
Yeah.
my continued education, and I got better just from speaking with you. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, you do an awesome job. Samson does an awesome job with this. So thanks for putting this together, and thanks for inviting me on. It was
Absolutely.
a good
Thank
time.
you. I appreciate the kind words. And the final piece is there. If anybody is interested in the line of the grind or interested in reaching out to you, what would be the
Yeah.
best way to reach you?
On all platforms, I am at Coach Sam Whitney or at Align the Grind. I have Instagram, Twitter, or X, whatever we're calling it nowadays. Uh, Threads, every platform. At Coach Sam Whitney is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, you heard it from the man himself. Reach out at Coach Sam Whitney. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Connor.
Absolutely.